Well, welcome back everybody. This is just another short video. I'd been asked some questions as regards the 4040 about the bed, because I have an aluminium T-slot bed. They use the original, they have the MDF original bed that came with it, and they said, how do you, it's not level. No, it won't be level. And what you have to do is you have to actually put a cutter in and actually surface the actual spoil board so that it's parallel to the gantry, the x-axis, and that, so you get it more or less. You'll never get it, it's not like a CNC machine engineering one. You will never get it that accurate. Even my large one, my Pro one, is, you know, the bed on that is, I mean, it's a cast iron, but it still does run out somewhat, because it's, you know, I'm not cutting metal, and it's not to the I would say accuracy of a engineering CNC. You pay thousands and thousands of pounds for those. But what I'm going to show you is, and I hope it explains to the gentleman concerned, I have a T-slot table. I replace that straight away. Now that aluminium T-slot is really accurate compared to an MDF spoil board, but however, my gantry, looking at the machine, is it works out roughly round about 0.6 of a millimetre, which is quite a lot. 0.6, well, it's 0.65 of a millimetre higher on the left side, that's near the control box side, than it is on the right. Okay, so when I put a dial gauge on, and I'll show you in a minute, it just shows mine's pretty much on the mark now. It's accurate enough for what I use it for. But what you'll see is the fact that even the aluminium T-slot table, and it's pretty well manufactured, it's profile, so it's pretty accurate enough, but you can see where it goes up and slightly down, where joins are, where the next one is buttered up to the mine's made up of 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, and where one butts up sideways onto the other, you can see slight fractional step, and these are perfectly flat, but there is discrepancies even in an aluminium T-slot table. But I will show you exactly how I actually dialed mine up to find that out. Now what you've got to remember is, if you go back to my previous video, if you look on my videos, you'll see one where I've used it as a pen. Okay, if I'm doing any carving, or carving on wood, or 3D relief, or whatever, the discrepancy, it will not show, because the cutter will cut into your 3D model where it's going, so it doesn't matter if it's half a mil out one side, you would never notice that. However, where the discrepancy comes in is if I were going to use this and put a pen in, like I did to do some pen drawing, which I did a video on that, then yes, it will make a big difference, because it means that if you set the tension at one side of your table, the right pressure on the nib, when you get to the other side there's no pressure on it, if you understand what I mean. Or it'll relieve the pressure, so it's not on as much. So it needs to be dialed in near enough, and that's what I did. I used a dial gauge, and I'll show you in a moment. But what you've got to remember as well is, somebody's asked me to do a brass plate, and they want it engraving. Well, I have a bit of brass plate that I'm going to experiment with, and what I'm going to use is a diamond drag bit. And if you remember the pen holder that I designed and that I use, and it works a treat, it really does. I've designed the same, it's the same pen holder that slots in, but it holds a 3.175 diameter diamond tipped drag bit. Okay, and what it will do is it should, like it does when it does with a pen, it should actually engrave on the brass. Don't know how it'll work, I just need to try it. I can do it with the if I put the rotor zip in or the motor in, I can put an engraving bit on and engrave it for them, but I just want to see if it'll do it. So that's one of the videos that I'm going to do. And as I say, if you're going to use that diamond drag bit, it needs to be accurate, because you have to maintain a little bit of pressure on, but what you don't want is too much in one area and not enough in the other, because that'll give you an uneven engraving. So you know, I've dialed mine in and I'm happy how I've dialed it in, but I will show you now the discrepancies on even a T-slot bed, and I'll show you where I've had to shim mine. And I use little brass shims, and believe it or not, I would have had to have had quite a number of, and the brass shims I use, it's 0.01 is the shim, so it's quite thin. But I found, and well, I needed something, and the right thickness plus tool shims was an hacksaw blade. I got an hacksaw blade, and because I had no other shim to use, and I actually broke the size off that I needed, made sure the teeth were flat, because they have a little bit of set on teeth on them, on hacksaw blades, so not much, but you do. So I just flattened those off, and then I put two pieces in for the main shim, and then instead of a load of brass ones, and then two small either shims on either side. I'll show you that. I mean, if you're using a spoil board, you can just surface that off and it won't make real much difference. You know, you won't have to bother with it. But I have a T-slot table, and I actually clamp things to the T-slot table and machine on that. Now that makes a difference to me if I'm doing any engraving, because obviously it needs to be correct. I'm not using a spoil board there. Yes, I could put a spoil board on top and surface that off, but I didn't want to do that. I like the T-slot table as it is, and I just made it more accurate. Okay, there is flex in the T-slot table, so you will never get away from that. It's not a solid bed underneath. You've got your main spars across from left to right on the x-axis, back and front, and but there's nothing in the middle. So, you know, I can push down on those T-slots, so there is flex in them. And same with MDF, there's even more flex in the original table. You can push down, and I can push down 2 to 3 mil in the centre, so you only need to be a bit forceful, and you can move that whether you're cutting or whether you're using an engraving bit or what have you. So I'll take you to the machine now, and I'll show you how I've dialed it in. Right, here we are at the machine. You can see my dial gauge, and I actually use the same setup from what I printed off for the 3D for when I was doing the pen drawing, the pen holder, and I utilise that, and it's pretty rigid. It does, for because the actual pin on the dial gauge is quite sensitive anyway, and that's in, if you look at it, and that's in millimeters. Okay, so it's set at 0 at the moment, and what I'll do is I'll put it on the x-axis, and then we'll travel across slowly, and you can see the gauge. Now it's 0 there. Okay, it's not moving, as you can see there. It goes across there. You see it jumps up, and that's on the same profile. That's the discrepancy there. So it's like 0.1 of a millimeter. Okay, move it across, you can see it, and then it'll drop back down to 0. That's higher on that one. See that? So it's slightly higher there in the middle. Now just this is what I mean. If you watch that, watch what happens if I press down. Can you see that? And I'm very little pressure on that, and that's aluminium T-slot. MDF bed, the original bed, is flexes even more. You can see that going across. Oh, as it hits that. And you can see it there, look, back to zero. And that's on this piece. And you can see that, that's pretty level. And I've got that level. You can just see a little bit of movement there. You see, that's because of the ridge on there. And that's back to zero. Okay, you can just see that. Now, that's because these are slightly raised in the middle. Now at this end it's right, at that end it's right, so there's nothing you can really do, because this is what it's out on the T-slot, and it varies between 0.1 and 1.15, which I'm happy with. It's about as accurate as I'm going to get on there, and I've tried it when I'm pen drawing, and it's brilliant. You don't even notice that in the pressure. Okay, and I've done it at the front, and I've done it at the rear, as far as it goes back. Okay, and even the T-slot's supposed to be accurate, but it just goes to show that when you secure them down to here, anything can happen. If you move them down, tighten them down at the front here, they can bow up in the middle, or they can go down in the middle. You know, and as I pointed out to you, if you watch that one there, I literally, that's not flexing because that's level. You can just see, well, you might not be able to see it on the needles, because that's ever so finely touching now. Okay, so I know that that's right. But if I move that back across there, get it on there. See that fine bit there? That's not even 0.1. Look, you can just see the needle moving, and that's very little pressure. So if I had something heavy on there, it could make a difference. And that's because when this machine when it's manufactured, there's nothing in the middle supporting whatsoever. All you've got are your side rails, your y-axis, and your front cross members here. That's all you have. You don't have any more front and back, and then these, but there's nothing in the middle. You know, I mean, people have, one gentleman, he's got his really dialed in, and he does more or less machining aluminium on it, and a bit of carbon fibre. And for this bed here, what he's got is a complete flat plate, aluminium plate, and it's been machined, and you can't flex it in the middle. It's fastened on at the front and the rear, and it's really accurate, and he just drilled and tapped to where he wants. If he wants something one day, he just drills and taps it, and it's really accurate. It doesn't flex, and it's perfectly level across, but he's had to shim one end up. Now I'll show you where the shims are on mine, if you can see them there. There's two brass shims at the bottom, and then them's the thicker ones at the top, and that's made that gantry now quite accurate. It's accurate enough for what I want it for. As I say, they are only hobbyist machines, and machining timber and doing 3D carvings, and even doing fancy shapes on it, it wouldn't make that much difference what it was out. But as I'm going to utilise some more drawing on here, then yes, it does make it easier on the nib. I don't have to have a great deal of pressure on the left side so that I can get the drawing on the right, because you could draw here on this side, it would be fine, but when it gets over here you'll have no markings, it wouldn't draw because you won't have the right pressure on. So yeah, that's how I've done it, and I'll just show you. Now, I was on about the diamond. What I'm going to do is, you see that pen holder there, that will hold a 3.175 diamond tipped drag bit. Okay, that will go in there, and it'll have the spring tension onto it like I did with the pen, and then I'll utilise that by just engraving, but that's for another video. So I hope that's shown a bit clearer, that the fact that even with a T-slot table, don't rely on it being accurate and level, because it's not. So if you clamp anything to here, that 1/2 mil difference is going to be on your item. Okay, if you put a spoil board on here, and then surface that, that's fine, and put to that, then it'll be accurate. Okay, but I do clamp a lot to this, the T-slot. Okay, I don't use a spoil board. If I want to do that, I do it on the 30-30. Right, and back round. As I would say, just be aware that if you are expecting great accuracy, if you're machining metal or aluminium, which you can do on these, there isn't a problem. Just be aware that your gantry is not forced to be correct, and mine's 1/2 mil out. Well, near enough, you want to call it that, which is a lot, and it's square. That's one thing I do know, but the gantry was 1/2 mil higher at one side, the control box side, than the right hand side. Okay, and that's how I've dialed mine in. The gauge cost me, I mean, you can do other ways. You can buy gauges that are, you could probably find your own way of adapting it to fit, but that was a cheap £11 dial gauge from Amazon, and it works a treat. And it shows me that my T-slot table goes up slightly in the middle but off at the ends, and it's the same at the left side as it is the right side. 4 inch in, it's the same, but in the middle it goes up slightly by 0.1, which is accurate enough for me. I can't do anything about that. I think some of that will settle out if I put something on that has a little bit of weight. It will drop that slightly, but I'm not going to worry anymore about that. So I said, this is just a short video, and I hope it, I said to the gentleman that asked me, I'll put a video on and do it and show you that in these circumstances, hobby machines don't mean to say that they're always accurate. They're within Sainsmart's tolerances, but I know that I've had to shim mine up because I've got a T-slot table on. Okay, there you go. I hope it's been helpful. Right, don't forget, like and subscribe, give me a thumbs up, it does help. Look at my other videos on my pen drawing, and watch out for the one that I'm going to be doing on the diamond drag bit, just to show you. It won't be done yet because I've still got the decorators in. I'm wearing it lad out. He's never done a staircase with 4 flights, well, 4.5 flights and so many landings. His steps he does is horrendous. It's a weekly workout, but as I always say at the end of my videos, be safe and be careful, and until next time, bye for now. Bye.